Hello everyone, so this is a rather belated review of Eve by Anna Carey, and I finished this novel last week. Excusing me, and yes, it was sent to me by the lovely folk at HarperCollins, so thank you all. So this is a dystopian novel set in a futuristic post-apocalyptic United States, as almost every dystopian novel is. Also disaster films. Does anyone else notice this? I mean, I'm honestly not trying to diss the US here. I just wonder at the fact that it's always the nation that seems to survive, or at least take center stage in these narratives, and then it leaves you questioning, well, did no other continents or nations survive? Is everyone else dead? Or is it just that because the character happens to be from the US, we're seeing this isolated, insulated, you know, very narrow worldview for the moment, because they don't know of anything outside, because, you know, an apocalypse can do that and cut off communication and cut off all knowledge of everything outside. But I know it's a question to ask. It may not bother other people as much as it seems to bother me, because obviously being from Australia, we're the nation that no one ever hears of, so I just assume we're dead in all these dystopians and all the disaster films. Often we're referenced in an offhanded manner that we're already dead, because we're, you know, an island surrounded by a shit ton of water, then we tend to die. So just like Australia's gone. Yep, it's wiped out. So you'll hear that every now and then in a disaster movie. You're just like, cool, we're dead. We're not going to survive because we don't have the fighting spirit that the citizens of the United States do and get you through. We're just dead. Anyway, back to the United States, which is surviving this virus that rampaged 16 years prior to the action of this novel. What this virus is, I don't know. It's never described. It's always just ambiguously, vaguely referenced. And it just struck suddenly, and an awful lot of people died and were very unwell, and apparently some of the land is still contaminated and remnants of the virus still linger, and it's possible to still get the virus, whatever it is. And Eve, our protagonist, heroine, was left by her mother. Her mother took her outside of the home and left her there for a truck to come and pick her up and take her to this school that was being set up for orphaned girls. And there were apparently schools or institutions set up for orphaned boys as well. Her mother was dying and had been dying from this virus for a little while, and knew that the end was nigh, and wanted to get Eve away and know that she'd be taken care of and that she'd be somewhere secure. So yeah, she left her, and she gave her a little note that opens the novel from her mum. Also, there's a little excerpt from Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, which, I don't know, Handmaid's Tale fans might find that insulting or fitting, I don't know. Depends what side of the spectrum you're on for opinions of this book. I don't know if that's giving itself a little bit too much credence, maybe, but that's just because I didn't find the book fantastic. I've yet to read The Handmaid's Tale, though. Shame on me. I've meant to read it for ages, but my friends always say, you'll probably find it difficult to get through, Renee, and I'm sure I will. But it's meant to be great, so... Having some lemon lime and bitters, which many of you may not know what that is. I was over in America recently, and no one knew what a lemon lime and bitters was. How sad is that? Anyway, back to the book. I'm rambling a lot. Yes, so we follow Eve, and she's been at this school for many years now, and it's the eve of their graduation. I think she's 16 or 17 now, and she's going to leave. And the story that is fed to all the students at this school, all the girls, is that they're going to exit their school, and just beyond the gates is another building where they will, it's kind of like their tertiary education, that'll be their college. They'll go there and they'll learn themselves a trade, a craft or something, a career, and then they're going to be able to graduate from there and go off to the city of sand, which is, I'm assuming it's what Los Angeles was, I don't know. And because we're in the state of California, because at some point they go across the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, so they have to be in California. Yeah, and so that's the story fed to the girls all these years that they're going to be able to graduate and then get a trade and then go off to the City of Sand and live their lives and be prosperous, and, you know, everything will be okay, and they'll find a refuge in this place where the king of New America, because of course there's a king, is building this new city out of the ruins of everything that was plague-ridden and stuff, and life is prospering and things are going to be good. And that's what all the girls are looking forward to upon their graduation. And then Eve runs into this lass named Arden, who's a bit of a bully, a bit of a rebellious student, and she tells her the truth about the school and what its purpose has in fact been in rearing up these girls, and some of the strange behaviour and goings-on within the school that the girls always just took for granted, and the truth is revealed, and it's quite horrific and worrying. And so Eve decides to follow the example of Arden and escape the school before graduating and before this fate can happen to her. And so yeah, Eve and Arden are on the run, separately at first, and then they eventually have to join forces. And while in the process of running away, they meet a lad named Caleb, and because the girls are very segregated within their school, they've never had contact with males. It's all just all-female teaching staff and stuff, and there's a lot of propaganda within the school, and like particular lessons and courses taught to the girls about the dangers of men and how they're, you know, sex-driven animals, and they're very primal and violent and cruel and not to be trusted and manipulative and all such things. And so the girls have a very skewed perception of guys, and so they're very wary of Caleb at first. Then eventually stuff happens, because I'm doing too much of a summary, and yeah, so that's the gist of the book. And it was okay. There were a lot of vague details, especially regarding the virus, which I guess we're going to find out in future installments because it's a series, but I was really curious as to wanting to know a little bit more info about what this virus was and whether or not it's a case, which is often something that can be interesting yet irritating with the dystopian novel, where the past that you're presented through the eyes of your protagonist or other characters, you have to sometimes take it with a grain of salt, because their understanding of what has occurred in the past and what they know might not be the whole picture, because they could be being fed lies, they could have been ignorant as to what was actually going on, and so they've made up their own little story which has spread and now become like mythology and become fact. So you never know if the details you're being provided by these characters are in fact the case, what really went on, or if it's just what they've been led to believe. So that sort of thing always makes you, like, you have to second guess a lot of the stuff you learn. And because all we've learned thus far is there was a virus, it just makes me wonder if it was in fact something else, or, you know, was there some kind of government plot thing? Was it something that was instigated on purpose? I don't know, because nothing else has been said. So that was frustrating. In terms of characters, Eve got on my nerves. At times she was reminding me of Megan Chase from the Iron Face series, which anyone who knows my opinion on that series will know that that is a big negative, like a thumbs down, big cross next to her name. She was nowhere near as annoying as Megan can be, but every now and then it was just a bit reminiscent of Megan's whining and complete inability to do anything productive or clever, and lack of common sense, and just, yeah, uselessness and annoyingness. And yeah, every now and then I felt that way with Eve, which was bad. I think I do judge her harshly, I suppose, which is unfair, because, you know, not everyone's going to be a kick-ass heroine, and not everyone's going to have the skills necessary to get by in every single situation they find themselves in, and that's fair enough, because we're human beings and everyone has flaws, and you can't be prepared for all these things that could potentially happen to you. I guess in dystopians, because you know that it's always going to be a pretty dire situation no matter what, you like to have characters who are somewhat equipped and able to handle things. I guess that's why I had a major preference for Arden as a character. She's not the nicest person in terms of her personality, and, you know, she wasn't the best fellow student at school. She wasn't always very polite or very fair to others. There's a bit of a backstory as to, I guess it doesn't excuse her behaviour, I don't think, but it does explain it a little. And also I just find her more resilient. I find that she was the one who was seeking out questions and answers and wanting to find the truth of things, and then taking action immediately. And, you know, she sorted her shit out, she learnt what she had to, and she, you know, equipped herself with the skills she needed, and she just, yeah, she's more perseverant, I think, than Eve is. When we meet Caleb, who's the guy and the love interest, he's okay. He didn't really have any overbearing traits that I found difficult to stomach. For the most part, he was pretty decent. He had some moments of very irrational jealousy later on, because of course the love story develops very, very quickly and seemingly out of nothing, and it's, yeah, very, very sudden, but as it almost always is, which makes me lose interest right away, because I don't care when it's formed on nothing, except, you know, a mutual attraction perhaps. But even then, sometimes that's not even, like, sometimes you can have a novel where they kind of skip over all the superfluous detail of someone's appearance and how often they focus on it, like Bella freaking Swan, which is a good thing, because you don't want to hear a million times how this person thinks this other person is really, 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 really pretty. Yet at the same time, if that's not even mentioned, then you think when the love just suddenly springs up, you're like, what the hell is this based on? I don't even know if you think that person's cute. What's going on? So, yeah, it was very sudden, it just happened, and I didn't really care at all. But Caleb didn't piss me off too much. Eve did though, so, you know, there's always one in the couple. One thing that was interesting was to see Eve and Arden, more so Eve, encounter males for the first time in, you know, in her experience, and to see how she was judging them against what she'd been taught at school, which for me was an interesting aspect thematically, because I'm a feminist, so I can be a little harsh towards guys sometimes, which is not fair in any way at all. But I'm very opinionated and I'm very vocal about my opinions regarding males' treatment of women and their perception of women and things. So to see Eve have to kind of work out and decide for herself what she felt about all of this was kind of interesting, because you see her meet Caleb and other quite nice blokes at the camp that Caleb's living with, and, you know, some of these guys are really nice and sweet and, you know, decent. And then you see some others who aren't that great, and she has to encounter an awful lot of leering and, you know, lecherous looks from some of the older boys that she comes into contact with, and then there's a few legitimate assholes later on. And so her, you know, realizing that whilst there were so many lies and so much hateful and biased propaganda getting thrown at her school, she's realizing the grains of truth that are within that, and the reasons for probably why her teachers would have been saying that stuff to the girls. And there was a passage I dog-eared just because I thought it was fairly well written. It's only short. Back at school, I had once argued for the goodness of people and the great capacity for change, but listening to him laugh, the radio held lightly in his hand, I sensed only depravity. One thing Teacher Agnes had said was true, even now. Some men saw women purely as a commodity, like fuel, or rice, or canned meat. And that is fitting for the character she's talking about, because he's disgusting. So that was just something a little bit different that came into it, and I thought that was interesting. I also thought there would be a wider discussion of procreation and the role of girls in just putting forth babies in this world. I'm assuming that's going to come into it more later in the series. I don't want to say why exactly. But that's, you know, that's often a pretty heavy-handed theme in dystopians anyway. I think I've said everything I want to say. Oh, except that the cover lies. I feel for authors, because I know they have next to no say in what covers end up running for their novels, which is a right shame and a travesty. And yeah, I also wonder about the complete lack of communication there must be between those commissioned to do the artwork, because little tiny things that shouldn't really piss us off, but there are discrepancies between the text and the visual that we see. So her hair colour isn't right, and the depiction of the Golden Gate Bridge on the cover here isn't correct either, in terms of how it's described in the book. And I realise that this just looks more haunting because it's so desolate and empty, but what's described in the book is also quite haunting in its own way too. And I would have liked to have seen them try to do that, but then it makes me realise, well, the artist probably didn't read the book anyway, so they wouldn't know what they have to do. So yeah, that's just something little that bothered me. In terms of pacing, it moved okay. I think perhaps, like anything else, I think maybe it could have been a good 50 pages longer, just so we could have had a little more detail. Because the time, like the middle section really, where Eve and Arden and Caleb were all together at the camp, could have been expanded upon a little more, because it was kind of the same thing each day being depicted and nothing new, and it was only kind of like, you know, you were skimming the surface of the lake of possibility of what could have been going on there, because it was an interesting scenario for them to be in, the two girls, and yet we didn't see much happen. Yeah, so I would have liked a little more time there. And the climax came pretty quickly, really. I say climax, it's not really, it's just kind of like an open ending. So it kind of left you hanging there. And I'm curious as to where it's going to go. I'm mainly invested in Arden's future. She's the only one I care about. But we'll see what happens. Hopefully some more interesting thematic material can crop up in the rest of the series. So I will give it 3 stars out of 5, but I do recommend it to anyone who likes the dystopians, which is an awful lot of people these days, so just give it a whirl. That's Eve by Anna Carey.